Depression often clusters in families. Michaela Peterson and her father, Jordan Peterson, are from such a family. Clinical psychologist in here who happens to be dad to explain. Does any of this make sense to you?
And there's more and more research on the role of diet and gut bacteria. Gut bacteria do produce neurotransmitters of various sorts.
Jordan Peterson taught millions to stand tall, to take responsibility, to face chaos without flinching. But now, the man who once commanded arenas lies silent, motionless, fighting a battle no one can prepare for. In a hospital room in Moscow, the voice that shaped a generation is reduced to a single terrifying question. What happens when the fighter becomes the victim? This isn't just illness, it's chaos itself, striking without warning, showing that even those who demand responsibility from the world can sometimes lose control of their own lives. And what happened next? No one saw coming. Peterson's silent struggle. By late 2019, Jordan Peterson had vanished. No videos, no lectures, no tweets. The most prolific voice in modern self-help went completely dark, and the silence was deafening.
With the popularity of your book and your YouTube lectures, you're obviously tapping into something that nobody else is tapping into at the moment.
So the first thing people noticed was his appearance. In the final interviews before he disappeared, he looked gaunt, hollowed out. His eyes, once sharp and piercing during debates, had become glassy and distant. His sentences, usually delivered with surgical precision, started trailing off. He would pause mid-thought, as if the words themselves were too heavy to carry. Something was deeply, terribly wrong. What the public did not know was that behind the scenes, Peterson's body had been quietly falling apart for months. He had developed a severe reaction to food. Not a mild sensitivity, a catastrophic systemic inflammatory response that left him unable to eat almost anything without experiencing crushing anxiety, insomnia, and neurological symptoms that mimicked a waking nightmare. Then came the benzodiazepines. It's prescribed to manage the anxiety, a standard medical decision on paper. But for Peterson's body, it became a trap. His system developed a physical dependency at a speed that stunned his doctors. And when he tried to taper off, the withdrawal symptoms did not simply arrive. They detonated. Akathisia. If you have never heard that word, count yourself lucky. It is a neurological condition that creates an unbearable internal restlessness. Patients describe it as feeling like your nervous system is on fire. You cannot sit still. You cannot lie down. You cannot sleep. You cannot think. You just exist inside a scream that never stops. Peterson later described those months as the closest thing to hell he had ever experienced. And this is a man who had spent decades studying the darkest chapters of human history. The gulags, the concentration camps, the capacity for evil. He had stared into the abyss professionally, but this was different. This was the abyss staring back from inside his own body. His family watched him deteriorate. His wife, Tammy, was simultaneously fighting her own battle, one we will get to shortly.
Well, it was remarkable to see her deal with that, really, to see Tammy deal with that, because Tammy's a very, very tough person, and even she got the news initially that she had a form of cancer.
His daughter, Michaela, became his primary advocate, researching treatments, contacting specialists, and eventually making a decision that would draw enormous controversy. They flew him to Russia, to a clinic that offered a procedure North American doctors had refused to perform, a medically induced coma to allow his body to detoxify from benzodiazepines without experiencing the withdrawal. The risks were enormous: respiratory failure, brain damage, death. They did it anyway, because staying where they were was not an option. and the withdrawal was already killing him slowly. In that ICU in Moscow, Jordan Peterson was placed into a coma, and for days, no one knew if he would wake up. The man who had told millions of people to confront the dragon, to walk into the darkness, to wrestle meaning from suffering, was now lying unconscious while his family prayed that his brain would come back online. He did wake up, but he did not come back whole. The coma had caused neurological damage. He could not walk properly. His speech was slurred. His cognition was impaired. He later said that for months after waking, he could not read, could not write, could not follow a conversation for more than a few minutes. The architect of 12 rules for life could not follow a single one. So how did he get here? How does a small-town Canadian kid end up as one of the most famous and most broken public figures of the 21st century? Chaos and rise. Jordan Burnt Peterson was born on June 12, 1962, in Edmonton, Alberta, a cold, flat, unremarkable stretch of northern Canada, where winters last forever and people learn early that the world does not owe you comfort. He was not a prodigy. He was not born into influence. His father was a school teacher. His mother was a librarian. What he was, from the very beginning, was relentlessly curious. The kind of kid who read Orwell and Solzhenitsyn at 13 while his classmates were reading comic books. Not because he was trying to be impressive, but because something about the darkness of the 20th century had already grabbed him by the collar.
People who are successful, let's say, aren't the people who are fortunate enough to have no problems. No one is in the category of fortunate enough to have no problems. People like that don't exist.
And would not let go. And he studied political science at the University of Alberta, then shifted toward psychology because politics told him what people did, but psychology told him why. That question, the why, would become the engine of his entire career. He completed his PhD in clinical psychology at McGill, then did something remarkable for a Canadian academic. He got hired at Harvard, not as an adjunct, not as a visitor, as a full faculty member in the Department of Psychology. His students loved him. His colleagues respected him. He was doing serious research on personality, alcoholism, and the psychology of belief. But Harvard was not enough. Or rather, Harvard was a chapter, not the whole book. In 1998, he returned to Canada and joined the University of Toronto, where he would spend the next 2 decades teaching, writing, and slowly building something that nobody, least of all Peterson himself, could have predicted. He started uploading his lectures to YouTube, not polished, produced content, just raw classroom footage. A camera pointed at a man pacing in front of a chalkboard, talking about Jung, Nietzsche, Dostoevsky, and the Bible, as if the fate of civilization depended on understanding them. Which, in his view, it did. The videos found their audience slowly, then not so slowly. There was something about the way Peterson spoke that cut through the noise. He was not telling people what they wanted to hear. He was telling them what they needed to hear. Clean your room. Tell the truth. Pursue what is meaningful, not what is expedient. Take on as much responsibility as you can bear. Simple ideas? Maybe. But he delivered them with the intensity of a man who had spent his entire life studying what happens when people abandon those principles. And his audience, largely young men who felt lost, purposeless, and invisible, responded as if someone had finally seen them. Then came 2016, and everything changed. The Canadian government introduced Bill C-16, which proposed adding gender identity and gender expression to the list of prohibited grounds of discrimination. Peterson released a series of YouTube videos arguing that the bill could compel speech,
Dr. Jordan Peterson, a clinical psychologist, podcaster, and author, was disciplined by Ontario's College of Psychologists for a series of online comments, including statements about transgender actor Elliot Page.
Forcing individuals to use preferred pronouns under threat of legal consequences. He framed it as a free speech issue, a line that a liberal democracy should never cross. The response was nuclear. Protests erupted at the University of Toronto. Students shouted him down. Colleagues denounced him. Media outlets painted him as everything from a courageous defender of liberty to a dangerous bigot. He was threatened. He was mocked. He was celebrated. And his audience exploded. Almost overnight, Peterson went from a relatively obscure academic to a global phenomenon. His YouTube channel surged past 1 million subscribers. He was invited onto every major podcast and news program. He debated Slavoj Zizek. He sparred with Kathy Newman in a Channel 4 interview that became one of the most watched news clips of the decade. Then came the book, 12 Rules for Life, an antidote to chaos, published in January 2018, sold over 5 million copies worldwide. He launched a global lecture tour that sold out theaters and arenas. He was earning millions of dollars. He was influencing millions of lives. From the outside, and it looked like the greatest success story in modern intellectual life. A professor who had beaten the algorithm, who had turned YouTube lectures into a global movement, who had proven that people were starving for meaning and willing to pay for someone who could articulate it. But from the inside, the cracks were already forming. Because the thing about carrying the weight of the world is that the world does not get lighter. It only gets heavier. And Peterson was about to discover that the man on the stage is not the same as the man at home. The collapse behind the spotlight. In 2019, while Peterson was at the height of his fame, his wife Tammy was diagnosed with a rare and aggressive form of kidney cancer. The prognosis was devastating. Doctors told them it was likely terminal. Try to hold that in your mind for a moment. You are the most publicly visible psychologist on the planet. Millions of people look to you for guidance on how to face suffering with courage. And your wife, your partner of over 30 years, the person who has been beside you through everything, is being told she might die. Peterson did not talk about it publicly at first. He kept touring, kept lecturing, kept smiling for photographs with fans who told him his words had saved their lives. But behind the curtain, he was unraveling. The anxiety became unbearable. He could not sleep. He could not eat. His autoimmune issues flared violently. And in that state of escalating physical and psychological distress, his doctor increased his dose of benzodiazepines, the same medication that was already quietly building a dependency in his system. Here is what most people do not understand about benzodiazepine dependence. It is not a moral failing, it is not weakness, it is a physiological reality. Your brain adapts to the presence of the drug. It physically restructures its receptor sites, and when you try to remove the drug, your brain does not simply return to normal. It enters a state of hyperexcitability that can last months, sometimes years. Seizures, hallucinations, suicidal ideation, death. Peterson tried to taper off under medical supervision in North America. It did not work. The withdrawal symptoms were so severe, the doctors kept reinstating the medication because allowing the process to continue seemed more dangerous than the dependency itself. He was trapped in a pharmacological loop with no visible exit. That is when the family made the controversial decision to seek treatment abroad. First in Russia, where Peterson was placed into the medically induced coma. The procedure stabilized his withdrawal, but left him with severe neurological consequences. He emerged from the coma unable to walk without assistance, unable to type, unable to hold a coherent conversation. Then they moved to Serbia for for further rehabilitation. Months of physical therapy, months of relearning basic motor functions, months of a man who had built his identity around his intellect, watching that intellect flicker and fade like a bulb running out of power. During this period, his daughter Michaela became the family's public voice. She posted updates on YouTube and social media.
I have an update on my dad. He's been suffering for the last number of years with unexplainable neuropathy and weakness, amongst other symptoms.
Often while visibly exhausted and emotional. The response from the public was split, and some people sent prayers, donations, and messages of support. Others accused the family of medical recklessness. Some mocked Peterson's condition openly, calling it karmic justice for his political positions. The cruelty was staggering, and it revealed something that Peterson himself had always warned about, that the capacity for malice lives in everyone, and that the internet gives it a megaphone. Meanwhile, Tammy Peterson, the woman whose cancer diagnosis had helped trigger this entire cascade, did something remarkable. Against all odds, against the predictions of her doctors, she survived. Her cancer went into remission. She was alive. But her husband, the man who had been so terrified of losing her, was now the one who was barely holding on. There is something almost mythological about that reversal. As if the universe had demanded a price and simply shifted the bill from one person to another. For over a year, the world heard nothing from Jordan Peterson himself. No lectures, no interviews, no tweets, just silence. And in that silence, a question lingered that nobody could answer. Would he ever come back? Peterson's hard return, he came back. Slowly, painfully, imperfectly. The first videos of Peterson's return were hard to watch. His speech was slower. His movements were careful and deliberate in a way that suggested each one required conscious effort. There was a fragility to him that had never been there before. The man who had once spoken with the force of a thunderstorm now spoke with the caution of someone who knew the storm could return at any moment. He cried more, and not in the performative way that public figures sometimes do for cameras. He cried in the way that people cry when they have been broken open, and the pieces have been reassembled, but not quite the same way as before. During interviews, mid-sentence, discussing topics that connected to suffering or meaning or family.
Children now have older parents, right? Because people aren't having children until they're in their 30s. There's tremendous competition in families among siblings, and they had younger parents who had fewer resources.
His voice would crack, and the tears would come, and he would fight them and lose. Some viewers found it uncomfortable. Some found it deeply moving. But almost everyone recognized that they were watching a man who had paid a price that most people only read about. Peterson has spoken about the experience in the years since with a rawness that surprises even his critics. He has described the akathisia as worse than anything he had ever imagined. He has said that during the worst of it, death did not seem like a threat, but like a mercy. He has admitted that his recovery is ongoing, that he is not the same person he was, and that he may never be. And here is where the story becomes something more than just a biography. Because Peterson's entire philosophical framework is built on the idea that meaning is what makes suffering bearable. That if you have a reason to endure, you can endure almost anything. That the purpose of life is not happiness, but the voluntary shouldering of responsibility in the face of inevitable pain. His own life became the ultimate test case, and the results are not clean or simple. Meaning did not protect him. His books did not shield him. His lectures did not make him immune. But the 12 rules he wrote for the world could not prevent his own body from betraying him or his own mind from fracturing under pressure. But meaning did something else. It gave him a direction when there was no destination. It gave his family a reason to keep fighting when the doctors had run out of options. It gave Michaela the language to explain what was happening. It gave Tammy a framework for surviving her own cancer while watching her husband slip away. Meaning did not prevent the suffering, but it kept the suffering from becoming the end of the story. Peterson returned to public life. He published another book, Beyond Order.
Beyond Order, 12 More Rules for Life by Jordan B. Peterson. This book is a follow-up to his previous book, 12 Rules for Life.
12 More Rules for Life. He resumed his lecture tours, though with a different energy. Less combative, more careful. There was a gravity to him that had not been there before, the weight of someone who had been to a place most people never go and had somehow made it back. His critics remain. His controversies continue. His political commentary generates the same firestorms it always has. But underneath all of that, there is now a dimension to Peterson that even his harshest detractors cannot fully dismiss. The dimension of a man who lived his own philosophy, not by choice, but by necessity, and emerged transformed. He once said in a lecture, years before any of this happened, that you do not get to choose your suffering. You only get to choose how you carry it. He said it as a professor. He lived it as a patient. And the distance between those two versions of the same man is the most honest measure of what meaning actually costs. Because the truth that Peterson's story reveals is both terrifying and strangely beautiful. Meaning is not armor. It will not protect you from the fire, but it is the only thing that will give you a reason to walk through it. And so the question remains, if even the man who wrote the guide to facing chaos can be brought to his knees, what does that mean for the rest of us? What unseen trials are waiting, quietly, around the corner, shaping lives we think we control? The story doesn't end here. It hasn't even reached its final act. What comes next will test the limits of resilience, meaning, and the very way we understand strength itself. Are we ready to follow and learn what happens when chaos strikes without warning?